I always try to kind of give you the game plan, where we're going, what we're going to be talking about today. Anytime you start, if you're ever coaching anything, you have some kind of pre-game ritual. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll move on to coaching strategies. So things that you'll plan to do even before the kids come into the classroom, which you can start doing now. And then game time, when they show up to the gym, what are you going to do? And then we'll do a post-game show where take questions from the media, thank any sponsors, and kind of give you a souvenir shop. So I always start off my pregame with a prayer. So if you'll bow your heads with me, I need some prayer this morning. A little nervous. I can already feel the jitters. So, dear Lord, just thank you so much for bringing us here today. I know that you have a plan for each of us in here. We may not know it right now, and we may not know it later, but at some point it'll be revealed to us, and we'll see the fruit of what we're all here building and trying to do together. Dear Lord, make the words that come out of my mouth today be the words that you want me to speak. Help me to be able to portray the ideas and the values that you have pressed on my heart to share with my students and my family and my staff at school. Help the people that are listening to me today to hopefully walk away with some insight to the way that you have guided us to work at CSW in our PE department. And just thank you for this beautiful opportunity and this beautiful place, getting us all here safe, and help everyone here to enjoy the rest of their day and all their learnings. And this I ask. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And then let me kind of give you the little coach's background. I've never used a clicker before, so I'm a little excited about that. So my name's Shawna. The kids call me Coach McGray. I teach K through 12 PE at Classical School of Wichita. My background, I was a banker in a mortgage industry. Actually, my degree was in animal science and management, and then I was a mortgage banker. Left to become a classroom teacher, left that to become a PE teacher because that looked like lots more fun. Then was a homeschool teacher, decided that we moved to Wichita and enrolled my son in Classical School of Wichita, and thought I would try to go into adult training, and so worked with aviation curriculum for about 6 months, and sitting behind a desk was not where I needed to be. So luckily, and I'll tell you a little story here in a bit, I got to become a PE teacher again, which I was very excited about. I'm a mother of two. I have one teenager and one second grader, both that go to CSW, and they are both boys. My smallest class size this year is I have 7 seventh graders that I see 3 times a week. And my largest is I have 32 fifth graders that I see twice a week. So the things and strategies that I'm talking with you about today are things that I try to adapt and use for both ranges. And like I said, I teach K through 12. So you'll see where a lot of the things that I do, I have very short periods of time between classes, so it has to be a lot of training and transitioning. But kind of coming back to you'll hear me talk a lot about God's got a plan for things, and Mr. Dolph that was speaking earlier today, just to kind of give you the background, this week has been a whirlwind week at CSW. We were working on accreditation, and I was a little nervous around there, had our observations done. In the midst of that, I lost my cell phone, and found out that my Google Sheets presentation needed to be all converted to a PowerPoint presentation, and it was a little wild and crazy. And I work with Tim Dolph, who is brothers with Mr. Dolph that spoke earlier today, and Trisha Buckingham is our assistant DA. She's there, and so she saw me frazzled this week when I lost my phone, and she brought up, and I don't know his name, but I wrote it down. Apparently, she must have been listening to the same podcast about prayer by Alec Trube. Did I say that correctly? I texted her. I was like, I need to find out who this was, because she said a very specific prayer. We sat down and prayed during our upper school lunchtime. Let's close the door to the office, and she prayed that I would have some extra time this week to be able to kind of pull things together and get things transitioned over to PowerPoint. And she prayed that I would find my phone in the next few hours. and was very, very specific in big prayers, which is very wonderful, because at about 3 hours later, my husband said, I found your phone, you left it at the Y. And he went and picked that up for me. And then yesterday, all of our 6th graders they were at Care Paravel, so I had my 6th grade period off, and my 4th graders went on a field trip. So I had another little break and was able to get everything transferred over. So I just think, that power of prayer works absolutely incredible. Similar with that, the transitioning from the aviation to curriculum to becoming a PE teacher, I'd been working in that aviation at the company Computer Training Systems for a few months, and walked in to pick my son up from basketball, and Tim Dolliff was there, and he saw me. I said, when I used to teach PE, we did this game with these scooters. It was kind of fun. He goes, you taught PE? I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, we might be looking for a PE teacher. And I said, well, I'm really liking where I'm at right now. Trying to get, and I'd only been there about 2 months or so. And then about July was the first summer that I had to work in a long time, and had shipped my kids off to grandparents and was missing them. And I called Tim on a Friday and said, hey, is that PE position still open? And he said, actually it is. The guy that we had offered it to fell through, and we're desperate in need of a PE teacher. Let me send your email to Mr. Dyson. And by Monday I had an interview and was now teaching PE K through 12 at Classical School of Wichita. So God's got a plan. I don't know how it all worked out, but it did, and I'm so absolutely blessed.
Much better than we would have ever imagined.
It's been fabulous, especially coming from, if anybody's taught, and this is the next part, you'll get the chance, you're going to tell me a little bit about yourselves. If you've come from public school education and you're transitioning into a classical school, private school education, it is such a blessing in freedom. And being able to experiment and do things, and having the support from your administration is extraordinarily helpful. So just by a quick show of hands to help me out a little bit, grade levels, how many of you how many of you teach PE? Some of you may or may not. Okay. How many of you are teaching grammar school, K6? Okay, that helps some. Upper school? And class size, less than 10. Okay, 10 to 20, and 20 or more. Okay, 20 or more, yeah, kind of going up there, you got that whole range. So hopefully this will help you to see how you can use some of these with all these different groups. I will tell you, my 7th graders, it's sometimes more challenging than my 32 5th graders, especially with PE, because so many sports kind of activities, finding things to keep them engaged can be very difficult. We were very excited when we actually added a student to one of our class, because we were an even number. And that was exciting in PE when you have even numbers. And then they dropped to take study hall. And I was like, no. They came back. They're like, we're back to 7. And then how often do y'all see them? Do you see your PE kids once a week? Somebody?
Which grade
levels? So show of hands if you're seeing twice a week. Twice? Okay. First and second you see twice a week, and your other grade levels once a week. Okay. Any of you see 3 times a week and daily? Anybody have PE daily?
I'm a kindergarten aide, and so we do brain breaks. So we take lots of, after learning for 40 minutes or half an hour, whatever, we stand up and we do jumping, or we do activities, and we thought this would be a great way to figure out some more activities we could do with them in the classroom.
This should be able to help with that. If not, I have my email too at the end, and I can send you some little quick things that you can do, and programs that you might be able to access as well. And then what does your space look like? Gyms, classrooms? So you guys probably a lot of classroom area? Wherever you can fit, that's the other one. I've been in hallways, I've been in classrooms, I've been out on a giant field trying to wrangle kids in to do something. So hopefully some of these strategies will help wherever you're at as well, because that's I've had to work in those situations, so that will help with that. Wrong one, that's the clear. So we'll talk a little bit about coaching strategy. Be ahead of the game before they even come into your gym. One of the things that Kevin Thames and I are really working on this year, and I feel very novice sometimes coming in and speaking on this because this is really my first year teaching PE in a classical environment. We're really working on putting together like a long-term plan. So a lot of times this year I've kind of tried and tested, okay, this worked, this is where we want it to go. That freedom sometimes moving from public school to private is very invigorating, but it's also when you have lots of options and you're kind of like, hey, you get to try this stuff out, you're kind of overwhelmed with like, don't know what to do. So that's really where we're now, is trying to plan for our postseason, which when I talk about postseason is like, what do I want my students to look like when they graduate from CSW? What do I want them to know? What do I want them to be able to do? So I always say, like, think big, start small. So at the end of my year, what do I want my kids to have an idea? And in PE, you don't always think about that. You're just like, I want them to not break an arm in my PE class. I want them to not push each other to get in line. And that may be way to go, but I really want my kids to think, okay, when I leave this class, I want to be able to know I can take a ball and try to throw it and get it across the room. I want to feel comfortable enough to pick up a ball and throw it. I want my kids to know where their bones are, where their muscles are, and how to move that muscle, why they're out of breath when they run, and how to get back into breath. So we've kind of broken it down in our PE group. This year, focusing on body knowledge, where we focused on bones, muscles. We're about to move into nutrition. And then before they leave for the summer, we'll talk about safety, health, and hygiene. Just some things to remind them up over the summer. And then for body movement this year, I've always focusing with locomotor movements, throwing and catching, striking, dribbling, and a fitness aspect in there at some point. But fitness, you'll see I kind of try to weave in and out. What I want them to know about it as they leave, how am I going to teach it, and how do I know they know it? And I try to ask myself, are they showing me, like, show me what you know? We talk about when they come in and they play tag, you know, what am I looking for when they come in and play tag? Am I just trying to wear them out? Or am I looking to see, well, which kid is not ever aware of their surroundings and bumping into those kids, and how do I get them to slow down and take a look? It's really designing with a purpose when you set a plan into what you're doing in that day. And so then once I've kind of got that, PE you'll find very specific. You've got to have some rules of the game. You set things up, set things into place that you want to have. And then keep them easy. And most of you probably, especially if you're seeing your kids 30 minutes to 45 minutes, it goes by really, really fast. And if you spend a lot of time with rules, whether it's rules of your game or rules of your classroom, they're going to forget the first rule by the time you get to the 7th. So really making them short, sweet, to the point. Keep them easy, and then repeat and refer. We probably have about 5 things that we repeat and refer nearly every time they come. If you're seeing your kids only once a week, you're going to have to make sure that you try to repeat them once a week. My kids that I see 3 times a week, not as often. But when I say repeat and refer, we'll come in and we'll say, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to be safe, we're going to be kind, we're going to be respectful, and talk about those here in a minute. And then talk to your team. So one of the things that I did coming into CSW is I went and talked to all of my grammar school teachers. What are the rules that you have in your classroom right now? Because if you can take the rules that they have in their classroom and use them in yours, even though you're seeing those kids once or twice a week, they're getting those rules reinforced there. Plus your teachers will love you because you're reinforcing what they want in your gym, so that it's not, oh, we get to come to the gym and run around and be crazy, or I have this rule in the gym, but I have this role in the classroom. And so I try to speak with the teachers and find out where they're going and what they want to do. And so in PE, we have the 3 B's of PE. We're going to be safe. And when we talk about being safe, that means that we're going to have the right tennis shoes on. We're going to make sure that we stay in our safe space, which is where we talk about that. We're going to make sure that we follow directions. The other thing about one of my 3 Bs of PE, because I've only got 3 of them and I make it general, it's very easy when somebody's misbehaving to say, are you being safe? And usually they'll say no. Or I'll even tell them, you're not being safe. You need to go sit out, or you get a warning, whatever the situation calls for. I put a little stop mark with an X. Be safe, or excuse me, one of the 3 Bs of PE, those type of rules that I have in my, those are more disciplinary rules. So if they break a be safe, a be kind, or a be respectful rule, that is either going to be, and I'll be very honest, I tried to do, back when I taught public school, one of the teachers I worked with did an S, an I, and a T warning system. So after you get an S, that's first warning, I, a second warning, T, you sit out, you go sit the bench. I forget. S, I, T, where are you at? I don't remember, do you have an S or an I? So usually you have a warning, or if it's severe, I'll just go sit the bench, which is underneath the whiteboard. And even with and I'll be very honest, with my 2 larger classes, my 5th and 6th grade classes, I don't even hardly give them warnings. I will tell them to go sit the bench, and then I sort it out over there. Because if I've got 30 other kids running around, I can get them started on an activity, address whatever the issue is, find out whether it's severe enough or not, and then send them right back out. I had 3 kids behind me the other day, or I was talking and they were behind me, and one was moving just to get so he could hear me. The other one was dancing, and the other one was saying that he did nothing, but apparently he was dancing as well. And I just had all 3 of them go sit down. I walked over and I said, asked the first kid, who hardly ever says, why were you're supposed to freeze? Why are you moving? He goes, I couldn't hear you. I couldn't see. I was moving. Okay, go get in the game. The other one, what were you doing? I was dancing. Okay, were you being safe? You being kind? You're going to sit here for 30 seconds, then you can get back into the game. The other one, I wasn't doing anything. Okay, well, clearly we have a miscommunication. You were doing something. We'll come back and check with you in a minute or 2. Go back 2 minutes later. Okay, I was dancing with Nicholas. Go back into the game. So, but that's why I have a stop there. Those are non-negotiables for me in class. If you're breaking one of those, you'll either get a warning or reprimand. But then you have games that you play. And when you have those games that you play, you don't want to penalize or have a kid sit out because they get really excited and they go out of bounds. Or they are, especially with my younger groups, they're learning their locomotor skills and they fall. Those aren't really penalties. You don't want them to sit out for that. So for those, I've got, we have simple games. Like anytime my kids move around the room, most of the younger ones don't even know what this means, like the you can't touch this. Some of them do, but we do the you can't touch this rule. You can't touch another person. You can't touch any equipment that I have out. You can't touch out of bounds, and you can't touch the floor. Now, these my check mark rules, because when they break a you can't touch this rule, they either go, we have a basketball gym with classical on one side, Saints on the floor on the other. You go over there, we pick an exercise of the day. They do 4 or 5, 3 or 4 of those exercises, they get back in the game. It could be jumping jacks. The other day we did like classical squats, and so we were paddle games, so they held a paddle in one hand, they had their balloon in the other, and they had to do squats. Sometimes we'll have them do jumping jacks, hit the paddle but they do 5 and they get back in the game. I love to incorporate these types of activities with them, because then you can also take it into that higher level of talking about integrity and being honest. And I shouldn't have to tell you if you broke you can't touch this rule. You just go take care of business and get back in the game. And so I'll have first graders who will bump into each other, and they both know that even if he bumped into me or I bumped into him, we hit each other, we touch. So they'll both skip over, do their little jumping jacks, and get back in the game. And so it's a great way to kind of go back and reinforce the values that you're wanting to incorporate in the classroom. We talk about integrity. If somebody comes up and tells me, hey, somebody fell on the floor and they didn't go do we talk, okay, did you fall on the floor? No, you keep playing, and then I know, and I'll go talk to him later. Did you fall? Well, yeah. Did you go take care of business? Well, and then you get to have those heart-to-heart, make those connections with them. And so anytime you have these kind of rules set up, and this is really easy, that you can't touch this because they, anytime we move around the room, this goes into place. And so but every time we do it, I remind them. And I'm silly, I act, I bump, so I'll even joke around. I'm like, okay, you guys tell me when I break, you can't touch this rule. I'll skip and I'll bump into, and they all yell, you can't touch this. And they get it, they want to contribute, and they kind of fill in with that. And so I'm a really big advocate for this. One of the teachers that I worked with, this is something that he did. You can set this up anytime you have any kind of game with boundaries. So if you have a game and you've got cones and they cross the cone line, okay, you broke it, you've crossed the line, you do 5 jumping jacks, you get back in the game. I've learned with my younger groups, they're more likely to learn to take responsibility for the action if they know once they pay the penalty, they get back in. I run into the case, I have a lot less lying or a lot less, my husband likes to call it lawyering up. Well, I didn't really touch that line that much I didn't touch it, my foot just went over the top of it. Well, go to your business and get back in the game. And so I've run into where this eliminates a lot of those lying, not lying, just those justifications. The other thing you've got to think about as a coach is your team dynamics. In my classroom, I have everyday team lines. I set these at the very beginning of the year as they came in. The first week, I always tell the kids, the first week of PE is the most boring week ever, because that's the day we talk about routines. That's the day I put you into team lines, and that's just, and I just lead with that. This is going to be really a boring week in PE. After this, it's all fun and games. But they have an assigned spots. In my assigned spots, I do my best to make sure, in my first year teaching their course, I don't know mixed ability. So I try to move them as I need to. But I always try to make my team lines mixed gender. That's very difficult with some of my classes. One class, I can think of my second grade class, we've got 3 times as many boys as we have girls. So every team line has 1 girl in it. And so then they understand that's the way it is, and it works out. My 7th graders, at the end of the day, they have team lines, and it's mixed gender. Now there's times that I let them group up girls versus boys, things along those, but every team line I do try to make them mixed gender. But then when you start getting into your game specifics, then you can start, I like to do some with the game specifics where I will either let them pick a partner in one way, shape, or form, and I'll show you kind of how I do that, or I'll have girls line up in front of me, boys line up behind me, and then I can send out, this is when I want to have maybe really make sure that my mixed abilities are there, because as the kids are coming, and I've got my girl, okay, this is my really strong basketball girl, we're doing basketball, I'm going to put her here, but I'm going to make sure that I put maybe not my lowest basketball playing person in with her, but like a mid-level, because I don't want her to dominate the whole thing. And then the same thing with the boys. I'll have them line up behind me and then go through it. So this is a quick way to kind of divide your teams up when you need to. Sometimes you just do the north, south, east, west. That's how my gym is organized. Have signs up on the wall for north, south, east, and west. And this is one I haven't used this year, but I had a teacher that I worked with, I referenced a lot of his stuff before. And when you're going to be doing a team, we did this when we did hockey. We did floor hockey in his, because we wanted our transitions to be quick and there was equipment and things like that. He had a magic marker and he had them put their hands on their head and he wrote a number on their hand, and that was the team that they were on, because we were changing teams out so often, they would forget. What number am I again? And so it was just really quick. They just walked up and he had a magic marker in year 1, year 2, year 3. And then when he would call the ones, all the ones knew they were ones. They could just look and see. And if you've already kind of set up the girls line up in front of me, boys behind me, that's a quick, easy, just write it down and then you can separate out and they don't forget. So you'll see, I keep hitting the wrong one. So those are my kind of team lines. My kids are working in their groups. This would be one of my stations that we have, and I've got when we do stations, they stay with their team lines. Those are my middle schoolers, and they're mixed ability. Even with that, you can't quite tell because the girls have their hair in a ponytail. This would be one where I had, this is more game specific, where they got to pick their partner. And when I say pick their partner, it's not necessarily picking their partner. We'll do things like we've just finished up with racket sports. And so they maybe have, like my blue team has rackets and a ball. And so they go put their ball up, but they keep their racket. And I have built mini courts. I'll show those to you in a minute. And you go to a mini court. And then the next group keeps their ball, but they've got to go find a team member that doesn't have one. And so they get to kind of pick their partner, but not exactly. And then even with that, I rotate out my groups as they'll rotate themselves around and kind of change and play with different people. And then on the same here. So this was the same activity. The girls all seem to migrate with each other. The boys all seem to migrate with each other. Calling plays. So this is something that you all, especially if your grammar school classes are already incorporating call and responses. These are the call and responses we do in PE. And I think we had a pep rally the first month or so of school, and we had all the kids in the gym, and they were going crazy. And I called out one of these call responses, and the whole gym just responded back. And we do that. I do cafeteria duty every day. And I use these in cafeteria and kind of brings us back. So some of these, I say freeze. They say hands on knees. They have to stop, drop everything, and look. And I don't move on until they do. If they don't, we just stand there. And it's the most awkward 10, 20 seconds sometimes. We're all sitting there and they're looking around and they're trying to figure out who hasn't dropped what equipment or who's not stopping. With my older groups, we talk about, because essentially you'll have the boy that when you say freeze, throws the ball and tries to hit it as hard as possible that last second. That's why we talk about dropping the equipment. When that happens, I tell them, look, I call them, look at everybody else around here. They're all frozen with their hands on their knees. You are now not being safe because you've hit a ball and nobody's ready, nobody's going to catch it, nobody's looking for it. You know, you have created an unsafe situation. So then it's really easy to circle back around to that, are you being safe? Because it's not, and then then it's talking about self-control, and yeah, you know, that freeze is there. To get their attention, when I want to give them instructions or they're the little chatter starting, I say, hey, team. They say, hey, coach, and they know that whatever's coming next is going to be quick instruction, and it's my turn to talk, not theirs. Stand tall, and they'll go whoop, and they'll stand up tall. That anytime I'm wanting them to transition and move from one thing to another, we usually will start with a stand tall. I've learned if I say like clean up and line up, you'll find different ways for them to like crawl and scoot and everything to where they want to go. So I always ask them to stand up before I ask them to move, unless the movement I want is on the floor. Applesauce. That's for them to sit down, crisscross applesauce. And then they'll say whoop, and then we'll go spoons in your bowls. They put their hands in their bowls. You're more than welcome to write these down. I will send these all to you as well, with a list of some of the ones that our school uses for call and responses that I incorporate as well. Part of losing the phone and having to reformulate that, I didn't get a chance to take these off of a black screen and turn them into an easy white handout for you. So. But whoop, spoons in your bowls. And the reason, if you incorporate this in, I like this because now, like I said, when we've done racket sports, anything like that, it's really easy to say, okay, balls in your bowl, or spoons in your balloon in your bowl. And so they'll put it there and they'll hold it there. And so we've even done this week, or these last 2 weeks, applesauce, spoons in your bowls, rackets on the floor. And so there's spoons in their bowls, they can't touch the rackets. To sit there and tap on the rackets. And one of the things that, I'll go through the rest and I'll kind of talk about some of the annoyances that you have to kind of plan for. Huddle, and that's usually when they're in the giant group and they'll say hustle, and they'll huddle up. And we talk about like what it looks like when the teams huddle up. And this is a great way to end your class period. If you want to have them come together after they've been playing around, especially games of tags, instead of saying, oh, come on in, come here. You say huddle, huddle, they say hustle, hustle, and they jog in. We've had to remind them, though, that they don't sit down until I ask them to, because they'll huddle up and then like the kid will sit in the middle and then everybody tries to run around them. So we don't sit down until they get there. And hustle, hustle, and then I can usually gather them, give information, send them on back out. And I use these with K through 12. So my high schoolers, I'll yell huddle, huddle, and they'll hustle up. I'll say applesauce, they'll sit down. And then, didn't put it on here, but I thought I had, and I will add it on there. Toe the line. We have our basketball court. It has the blue line all the way around it. And so toe the line, they'll say, aye, coach. And they must move to whatever our line I ask, put their toes on it, and they'll salute me, and I salute them. And then this is a great way to check for tennis shoes to be tied. Mud on their tennis shoes. You can have them toe whichever line you want so that they're ready to go. We do this sometimes as they're lining up to leave. And it's just kind of an easy way to get them to where they need to go. The one I didn't have on here was Superstars. Superstars is their assigned spots. And so I'll yell Superstars, or you can create whatever name you want. And I'll yell that. They'll go bing, and they run and must stand on their spot, not sit. Because if you have them sit, then the next kid that's trying to get to their spot will stand on top. One of the other things that I'll do if I get them at their spots to keep them from sitting down is we do Let's Go Saints. And if I say Let's Go Saints, then they'll do jumping jacks and we'll spell out Saints. And then we go Saint, 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 strong, and they freeze. And I walk around and they've got to hold that pose, and I try to pretend to tickle them or kind of get really close, or I'll jump out and tell them, see if they can hold that freeze for a moment. And that's a great way to kind of keep them standing at their spots where they want to sit all the way. And that's another reason why the first week of school is really boring sometimes for them, because we do a lot of these reviews. And then these are ones that these are my quick calls that I'll use. When I ask a question and you'll have kids start kind of blurting out, I usually personally will let one kid that says the right answer blurt it out, and then you'll hear the other kids like, oh, and then your hands will start to rise. But instead of waiting for that, after I hear somebody kind of say it, I'll say 1, 2, 3, you tell me, 1, 2, 3, and then the whole class will usually say what the correct answer is, and that gives them all a chance to kind of participate in. We've also, I know it kind of sounds silly in PE, we've incorporated think time. So I'll tell them if I ask a question about a muscle and you can see the same kid raises their hand, I'm like, okay, we're going to get 30 seconds, catch your breath, and think about what this answer could be. And then let's see if anybody else has any ideas, and we'll go that way. My cleanup and lineup, this is how we do cleanup and lineup, is repeated quite often in class. Cleanup and lineup is how we end and ask people to line up. I'll give them an instruction, and I'll say when I say cleanup and lineup, this is what you're going to do. And then they'll clean that activity, they'll line up. Or I change it, clean up and set up. So if we're getting ready to play again, we're going to clean up and set up again. When I say clean up and set up, everybody gets one ball and toe your blue line. Clean up, set up. And they'll pick their ball up and they'll line up. Or they'll go to the spot. And then when we do stations, I'll have them, I'll always say freeze. You have to drop that equipment. And so they'll be on their knees, and I'll say point to your next station. They point to their next station first, because they're always worried about what the next station is. So I always try to address that first. And while their hand's there, I'm like, okay, look around. What do you have to clean up before you leave? And so then we point, look, clean up, move along. They go to the next station, but they can't start till the music starts. So it doesn't matter how fast they get there. And that way I can always check to make sure that nobody has left a big mess behind them. So it's kind of some of those quick coaching. Oh, here we go. Equipping your team. I'm on a really tight budget. I don't really have a budget. So I kind of came in to what was there and went through. So one of the things that I have really incorporated, music and you'll see that here, music is cheap for the most part, so using that all that you can. Music makes some moves. If you can have a boombox, a Bluetooth speaker, we have a really beautiful sound system that was new put in. So I have a Bluetooth receiver that goes in. I'm in the basketball gym. That's the space that I have. And so I have a Bluetooth speaker, you can use a Bluetooth speaker. I have a Bluetooth receiver that my phone feeds to, and it feeds over there. I just found out recently that the Latin teacher has to hear my hamster dance probably 4 times a day. So I think that I've been trying to keep it down a little bit for him. And then I use a variety of music. I use everything from classical music, Christian music, Disney music, instrumentals. I try varied tempos and beats, because depending on what activity you want your kids to do is how fast you want them to move. And Miss Taves and I have talked. You play fast music, they're going to move fast. If you play slow music, like I'll play the Mission Impossible song sometime when I really want them to be quiet and focused on something, or the Pink Panther song, I have that. We'll play that, and they're like, oh, this is the Pink Panther, da-dunt, da-dunt. And it's so neat to see them slow their bodies down. But it also have the Bumblebee song when I want them to really get up and move. And then we played the animal song as well. The other thing I use music for with those varied tempos and lengths is that, especially if you use kind of a good set of songs repeatedly, the kids start to know when they're going to end. And so you can, if you know, they know that at the end of that 2 minutes, they can hear the music, they'll start gathering their materials because they know they're going to have to stop in a minute or so. And for me as a timekeeper, okay, this is a 2-minute song. I know how long I want them at that station, and I'll be able to kind of move and change that up. Sometimes I slide my phone back a few extra seconds because I want them to play longer or go a little faster. And so really some music selections that you can choose. Look at some varied times and lengths that you can go along with. And then build with basics. These are my go-tos I have probably spent, and this is, I kind of went out and bought them because I knew how important they were for me. Cones, I love cones. Went to Home Depot, and I have varied sizes of cones. I have the tall cones. They're wonderful for nets, if you have to make mini nets. Jump ropes, luckily we had enough jump ropes that was easy. Pool noodles, wait till the September, and they go on sale for like 50 cents. Miss Taves used them for rhythm units, so she has a bunch that I borrowed and used for tagging sticks, but we've gone back and forth. Balloons are some of my favorite things to use. Towels. You have lots of activities with kids. You can pull them around on towels. They can pull each other around on towels. And it's a great cardiovascular and muscular exercise for them to do. And they're already sitting on the floor, so they're not going to get hurt if you have a slick floor, so really not going to hurt themselves too bad. Bandanas, if you don't have scarves. That's if you don't have a way for kids to designate teams, they can put bandanas, they can tie them around the waistband. My middle schooler and high schoolers love to tie them on their arms to designate their teams. I used to play a game quite a bit called Dragon Tales, where you could stick the bandana out of your shirt. Our girls were jumpers, which I learned was very difficult to have a scarf hang out of at times. So that's been something that it's kind of been a challenge to do, but there's lots of activities you can do with bandanas. Electrical tape is my favorite thing because I use it to get varied colors. I have my 6 colors. You can label your equipment, so all the kids get, that's the red equipment, that's the green equipment. You don't have kids fighting over equipment sometimes. My spots on the floor, the gym teacher doesn't get, or the basketball teacher doesn't get too mad at me about that. Bounce balls, they're the ones that they find at the go to Walmart and you'll see them, those big bouncy balls. Your kids don't need volleyballs or $17, $20 volleyballs if your school doesn't have that for practicing volleyball. Balloons and those 90 cents, 50 cents sometimes bouncy balls, they are perfect for K through 5th at least. Your 6th graders can use them too. Usually when we were doing our volleyball station, I would have all of those out. I'd have balloons as an option. I'd have the bouncy balls out as an option. And when the music played, the kids could come change them out if they wanted. So if they felt like, okay, the balloon, I've already mastered bumping with a balloon. I'm going to go get a bouncy ball. But we had, like, if you kept missing with the bouncy ball, you'd see the kid bring the bouncy ball back and go back to the balloon. They want to be successful. Most want to be successful and not silly. And so they kind of will use those out. And they're, like I said, affordable. Carpet samples, you saw my kids in the game before they were standing with carpet samples. They can slide around on them and play carpet tag on a gym floor. And you can usually get those for free. And laundry baskets, it's a great way to organize your materials. Also great for tossing into having them if you don't have buckets, things like that. So, keep using the pointer. So you can kind of see, I use pull noodles and cones for agility courses. Picture doesn't show really well here, but in between these cones right here are jump ropes. And so those are mini nets, and I've got mini nets set all over. And then we had the big net during our volleyball and buckets there. So each bucket had a volleyball, like a volley light, I think, because this was my 5th and 6th grade, a volley light, a bouncy ball, and a balloon in each of those buckets. And so the teams could decide what they wanted to use. So you'll see the kids kind of, so then I took those same cones and those same noodles, and then that was an over and under course. And so they had to go under one, over, under. 3 minutes. I never leave a kid at a station more than 3 minutes or they tear it up. Not intentionally, they just, by that time they're either getting tired and so they're stumbling and tripping or they're making their own game. Down here, those same jump ropes, that same cone becomes, this is called Shake the Snake. And so he stands there and he shakes the snake back and forth. She's got to jump 3 times and then he gets on and shakes the snake 3 times and they switch back and forth. And then when you get into, we talked about having even teams. When you get into jump ropes later, if you're trying to get group jump ropes, those larger cones help when you don't have an extra person. You can put the top of the jump rope in there and the kid can practice spinning or at least doing the rock back and forth sometimes. And then I turned those cones and those hula hoops again. This is a station that we just worked on or a group that we just did with our striking station. So the kids had to strike and they could either toss and hit. I found some cheap badminton things at the end of last summer for like $2 at Walmart or something. And I had badminton rackets and they could toss and hit from the hoop out that direction. Or for my kids that were struggling with the tossing and hitting, they could use the cone as a tee and practice their forehand on a tee. And so try to find as much uses with the equipment that you have. This is where I struggle, which you see me check my thing a lot. Clock management, contingency plans. When it's all working right, this is what I'd love for it to do. 3 to 5 minutes, what we're doing, what we're learning, skill review and practice. Show me what you know is the game. And I always either stop every 2 to 3 minutes during a game, either to change teams out, check. I've noticed you let a game go more than 3-4 minutes, it becomes somewhat unstructured. And so I'll stop. And even if it's just to stop, hey, what's working for you? What's not? What are you seeing that's helping you out? And just a quick break to say, what could you change? How could you do this better? And then clean up, line up at the end. If you're like me and you have a quick switch, change out equipment during the warm-up times. Same games for different kids, you just change your degree of difficulty. And then use warm-up or skill review to help students set up. We just did a game with the rackets recently that I needed to get bean bags out everywhere, so it became a freeze dance game. We put them all in the center circle. When I called your team line out, they skipped up, they picked up a bean bag, they had to carry it, they could dance with it. When I said freeze, they dropped the bean bag on their floor. So I got my warm-up in, I got my equipment out, and then the same thing with cleaning up. Okay, we're gonna clean up, pick up a bean bag, dance it over to the swimming pool, drop it in the swimming pool. If that freeze, you gotta freeze. If you're not teaching PE or if you need to, most of you said you may or may not, things that you really have to plan for. Water breaks, when are you gonna let them go get water? My kids can't get water unless we're playing a game and the music is playing. If we're playing a game and the music is playing, sure, go get your water. Okay, if I'm talking, giving instructions, don't ask me for water. If we're doing a warm-up, don't ask me for water. Bathroom breaks, same policy, unless it's an emergency. If you see your kindergartner, though, you know it's an emergency sometimes. Shoe policy, this you have to really work with your school to decide what you want to do. It's somewhere where I struggle with shoes. I'm an advocate that they need to have tennis shoes no matter what. If they wear boots, they have to sit in the bleachers. Sometimes I have an activity off to the side for them to do, but if we're doing a big group game, they can't participate in it if they don't have tennis shoes on. When and where do you want them to tie their shoes? So we have designated areas on the gym. This is where you go if you need to tie a shoe. Please don't stop in the middle of our playing area. This is play area. This is where you tie your shoes. Where do you want them to go if they get hurt? Tell them where to go. And so my whiteboard is my bench. You go to the bench for everything. You go to the bench if you're in trouble. You go to the bench if you need help. You go to the bench if next to the bench is where you tie your shoes. And that way it's a quick, easy to see who needs hurt. How are you going to handle the what if questions? For me, it's like, well, they start asking what if. And I'm like, well, we'll see what if it happens. And then we get back into the game. That's very, very minimal things. He said she disputes. For me, they go to the whiteboard and we sort them out there. Usually the disputes will work themselves out, especially if we're playing a game, because they want to get back in. If a teacher's running late or if a teacher drops off early, have a plan for that. Sometimes I'll have hokey pokey. And I'll play hokey pokey over and they'll do hokey pokey while they're waiting for their teacher to pick them up. Game time. I will send this to you so you can see this. This is a quick warm-up that we do to our rattlesnake run. Leader holds an instrument such as tambourine or maca. Before we start, we chant eyes in front, safe space ahead, headlights forward, be a bubble head. We use our mouths for breathing, not for speaking when we do the rattlesnake run. There's no stopping or passing in the rattlesnake, so I'll say, are we passing? They say, no, we're pacing. Are we racing? No, we're pacing. Our hamster dance, and I'll show this to you guys in a bit. This is something that we do for those of you that your 3-minute breaks. This is a great thing for you to do in there. You may even be able to do our what's it called? Or Who Let the Dogs Out. Use this. I do this very early on. I give a brief story about Ralph and his motorcycle. Then I ask what would happen if we woke up one day and discovered we were like Ralph. Music starts. The athletes lie on their back and they wake up and they're stuck in a cage. And so we talk about there's nothing to do but get out on the hamster wheel and ride it. And so ride the wheel, we lay on our back and do a bicycle kick, down and rest, stretch, up and eat, V-ups, and I can show you how that all works. Roll over, get a drink of water, we do a cobra stretch, push the ball, we bear crawl, crawl out of the cage, we climb up, but I yell cat, and they gotta freeze and touch their abdominals at times. Run to your motorcycle, they get on their spot, they crab walk, and then grab your helmet, hands, handlebars, feet, balance on your seat, feet in the air. And I'll show these to you. That's why. Our Waka Waka, this is one of the things that I love to do. It's taught and practiced the first couple of weeks. They're in their assigned spots. The first person here will do some kind of movement, some kind of exercise, some kind of dance move, whatever it is. The rule is it has to be safe. So they need to we try to keep both feet on the floor unless we've been practicing things with both feet in the air, which we haven't, so we don't incorporate that. The leader must be kind by repeating the move over and over. If they're doing a dance move, they can't just keep changing it around because nobody in the team can follow it. It's got to be repeatable. And then for my teams, they have to be respectful. They have to respect the person that's teaching them and respect their body and do the very best that they can to do it. So if they're trying to show you something, even if I have girls, I can't do that. God gave you arms, he gave you legs, you can do that. Let's do it. And then on the signal, I blow a whistle. They sprint back to the back line. They love to race, so this gives them a chance to race, but everybody must travel on the right. We practice this pretty often the first couple of weeks, and then it comes into my regular rotation. And this happens, one of these things will happen every day when they come into PE. One of these 3 things. And then Who Let the Dogs Out? Usually I do this with my 3rd through 12th grades. Each row lines up behind the leader and my team line. The entire row sits down and does 3 to 5 curl-ups. Then they'll roll over. And of course, Who Let the Dog Out is playing while this goes on. An instrumental version though, because we read and learned what the words of that song really meant. So we play an instrumental after the first announce who let the dogs out. Each person in each row is the dog. They get and they crawl on their belly through that dog house. The picture that you saw of my middle schoolers that were up, that's what was happening there. They had built the dog house. They were crawling through their dog house on Army Crawl. Once that first dog gets through, the row moves. They all lay on their back and they do 3 to 5 more and they roll. I'll show video of that here in a minute. These are our muscle groups. God, that were my See, time management is my issue. These are how we've learned our muscle groups this year. I yell pound, they say my pectorals, they help me with push-ups. I say abdominals, they go, it moves me all around. That's my kinder, that's all they gotta learn. My first grade learns pound, abdominals, then we do big. My first grade goes, they do the first 2 plus biceps, bend up my arm, tickle the triceps, take them back down. My second graders, which are my giggly group, this was really hard to go with them, but I knew I needed to learn this. Quick legs come from my quadriceps, and I'll say hamstrings, they go help out too. I just decided I was gonna say gluteus maximus. So I go the gluteus maximus, and they go, gives me maximum power, and they all giggle and laugh. But they've all learned it. And so that gets me through my first, kinder first and second. We've incorporated this, keeps going, grip the gastrocnemius, then we slide down and squeeze the soleus, and the anterior tibialis tips up my toe, and they'll bring their toe on up. That's my third grade. They learn all of those plus that. And fourth grade is now learning deltoids, drag my arms out wide, and bring them down with the latissimus dorsi. And so we bring that on down. We're adding in, this is my unit I'm finishing up right now, so I'm still coming up with the rest of those for the rest of our groups. But that's as far as we've gotten with those. We did do bones at the beginning, so scratch, scratch, scratch your skull. My upper school learns that your skull is made up of your cranium and mandible. Your collar is your clavicle. Rub, rub, rub your ribs. And then these are kind of out of order. And then my kinder goes pat, pat, pat your patella. I put it in the order in the body because that's how I did it with my upper school. But my younger groups learned the ones that were in 3s. Slide down your sternum. You hug, hug, hug your humerus. Feel for the femur, but you can't really feel it because it's covered in muscle. We talk about that. Tap your tibia, flick your fibula. Your fingers are phalanges and so are your toes. Vibrate on your vertebrae. They still have to shake your pelvis like Elvis. You scrape across your scapula, and then you wrap on your radius, your ulna's underneath. And so we've kind of gone through that. And the kids helped come up with the radius one. I was having a difficult time with that. And then learning on how we want to keep incorporating this. This is the first year doing this, so my 6th, 7th graders learned all of them. But my first kinder and first only earn like 2 or 3 at a time. And you can choose which ones that you feel like. And again, if you email me, and I'll have the email at the end, you can send that. So I always incorporate building strength and endurance in my warm-up, be intentional about it, incorporate cardio, have your athletes set a goal, use correct form, and I always try to place publicly. Stations, set up a station, review a skill, agility, balance, fitness. Those are whenever I set up stations, I always have at least 4. Those 4 things are always incorporated. If we're doing a new skill, there'll be something like we did striking, they had a balloon and a pull noodle, and they could hit with that. And then actually have an everyday, have an activity, or incorporate it every day. So earn your way back into the game with an exercise, or I incorporated it into the game. So we did one where we were tossing with a racket, and if your partner didn't catch it on the racket, you had to get down and do 3 burpees, and then you moved on to the next one. So it was not a punishment, it was in the game, but it was incorporating that fitness and skill. My upper school, we have a training day schedule now. I took them to the YMCA, and we had a spin instructor teach 2 classes to them. So we did 2 spin classes this past week. With my upper school, really trying to get them to feel comfortable going and finding ways to be in fitness after playing sports, because that's what tends to happen when they leave high school. Again, my long-term goal is, can I keep them active after they finish school? And then you can use your standard fitness assessments if you'd like. There's the presidential fitness assessment. I've used FitnessGram. You can look those up, where you do pacer, I personally avoid doing any height and weight. I figure they're going to the doctor, they're getting that there. They don't need me to track their height and weight at school. I would much rather have them track how many curl-ups they're doing, push-ups if they would like. These are some of the stations that I've set up. You saw some of the agility one, that one they had to crawl under. I took our tug-of-war rope and tied it around a pole that we had for volleyball, and the kids used it as a battle rope. And those are kind of neat because I can do that with, again, kinder through high school, and they can adjust that. And then post-game show. Gym to line, and if you look this up, if you want a handout of 1,000 different activities to do, if you will go to Gym to Line, you can't spell hope without PE, it's on the openphysed.org. I worked with him for about a year in Texas. I was a travel teacher, and so he happened to be my travel assignment one year, and phenomenal. Almost all of these warm-up ideas came from him. So I can't at all take credit for most of what is done with that because a lot of it is incorporated from him. He's taught me. I've made changes to it to help us fit in our classical curriculum better, but for the most part, a lot of that came in. And incorporating a lot of the health stuff, that came from my working with Austin ISD physical education department and curriculum development. That was a big focus with us there. We were teaching our kids about tobacco and tobacco usage and to some extent a little like drug use, and I didn't want to go into too much that with our group yet, and I haven't. That's going to be with Mr. Thames and I talking about what we really want them to know, but I really wanted them to know their muscles, and they like to know that. That's the other thing too. They want to know what those body parts are called.